What's up, friends? Today we're here with a long-awaited video, at least in my opinion. Today we are going to be installing the Newbee RTKP trucks onto my mountain board and replacing the Apex Airs. Now, this is kind of a trial thing where I'm going to be putting these on, seeing how they perform and comparing them to the Apex Airs. And I'll try to give you guys as much feedback as possible. And Newbee actually sent me these a little while ago, and happy to finally be putting them on my board. So hopefully you guys will find this video interesting. We're going to install the trucks probably in about 10 minutes or so, and then I'll dedicate the rest of the video to my first ride experience. So let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be quite a long process. Alright, so we actually have quite a bit to do before we can even really think about putting it on the new trucks. And first off, we need to take off the wheels. Go ahead and set it up on some stands here. And then we'll go ahead and take off the top of the Megan unit. Pull that off and then take off the base plate underneath and unscrew the truck. That part is fairly easy and won't take too long. But on the back of the board over here, it's gonna be a little bit more of a process. First off, we gotta take off the lid on the ESC box, take off the ESC box off the base plate, take off the wheels, demount them from the drives, take off the drives, and then unscrew the base plate, and then do it all again in reverse, and then we'll be able to go on our first ride. So we've got a little bit to do, but hopefully you guys will find this interesting, and I'll try to keep this part down and just kind of show the interesting parts of swapping out the trucks. Alright, so the front truck is now off, and I had this 5-degree printed riser on there. Looks great, didn't wear hardly at all, but let's check and see by chance if it fits on the RTKPs. And that's gonna be a no. It is way too long and a little bit too skinny for, or the RTKP is a little too long and too skinny. But anyways, that's fine. The RTKPs are already angled. Don't know what exact degrees they are, but we're going to be running them on this board with absolutely no riser at all. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and slap these on the Hero Bro here, and we're going to be putting it on with the kingpin facing forwards, and the pivot cup will be facing forwards as well, because that's how you're supposed to install them. And this will just slap straight onto the deck in the standard skate hole positions. There are, I think, two positions on this deck that you can mount it in. And my old trucks were in the furthest out position, and I'm just going to go ahead and put these in the furthest out position as well. If I decide that I want more turning performance and a little bit higher ride height, then I'll move it to the inner position. But for now, we're going to leave it on the outside, and I think it will be just fine. Unfortunately, these screws are quite a bit long for this base plate now, since they were originally going through a riser, but it should be okay, and they've held up thus far. Getting the front truck installed was fairly easy, so now let's go on to the back. Alright, so I got my ESC box taken off, and if I recall, I think the only thing I have to do is remove this little set screw and the giant bolt, and then I should be able to slide the drive off of the truck. So we're gonna go ahead and loosen those up and see what happens. Alright, I went ahead and loosened up the second side, and fortunately this side seems to be a lot looser than the first side after loosening those up. First side took a little bit of coaxing off with a hammer to make it happen easily. So we'll go ahead and get this off, and then we can untwist it and take off the rear truck. After taking off this PLA Plus riser, it looks pretty much good as new and not even used. On the rear RTKP here, we're going to go ahead and mount this with the pivot cup and the kingpin facing the rear of the board, similar to the forward one facing forwards. On here we do have a slightly different bushing. We have a gray 96A chubby barrel instead of the standard barrel on the front. Maybe this will be sluggish, but I'm not really sure. We'll see in the first ride. So we went ahead and got the rear truck mounted up here, and I'm hoping that it's going to be real simple, and all we have to do is slide on the drives and tighten them down. Usually DIY doesn't go like that though. So what I ended up finding out here is that the drives were actually pretty difficult to stick on there, especially while they were still attached to my ESC enclosure, but it was a matter of loosening up the angle adjustment bolts to help loosen the clamp, and then I was able to tap them on and get them into place. As I predicted, it wasn't as simple as I thought, and it took a bunch of messing around with the actual length to get this right. And one of the important things to do with Newbee drives is make sure to set your length from your axle correctly. So this is one of the widest wheels that I will be putting on here with the widest tire. So I went ahead and set the drive in place according to this wheel and tire combo. Now, you can adjust the place later, but it is kind of annoying. So I got that done, put the spacer in there, and now basically what we got to do is fix the other issue, which is the motor bite. The only real way to fix this is to change the angle of the drives, which is not that hard, but it is another step. So we're gonna have to go ahead and take the wheel off again, set the angle, and then we'll check it for motor bite again, and then do the second side. All right, so it turns out changing the angle is actually not that big of a deal at all. All you have to do is loosen up the 5 bolts here, and then it will release the angle, and all you have to do is turn it to the right spot. So I'm gonna probably put this down 2 notches so that it doesn't hit the deck anymore, but we'll check back in a second. All right, so I went ahead and adjusted the angle of both of the drives. It ended up only being 1 notch. Seems like the notches are kind of a lot of angle change, but we still have plenty of ground clearance back here, and now it doesn't hit the deck. So yeah, also I kind of did this wrong. You're supposed to well, it makes it a lot easier if you loosen up all 5 of these bolts first, then loosen this, because it will let go of the hanger much better. And this one I'm able to just slide back and forth. Well, I can't do it with one hand, but it's easy to slide back and forth right now with those screws loose. So I'm gonna get these all in place now, put on the other wheel, and then we'll attach the ESC box, and that'll be pretty much it. We can move on to our first ride and see how these bushings feel. All right, so I got both of the drives in place on the truck. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the big bolt and then snug down the other 5 bolts that hold the angle, and then finally tighten up the set screw very carefully. And then we can put the other wheel on and we'll be done. All right, everything is mounted up back here. We've got both wheels on there. We got the ESC enclosure mounted back up. And now all we gotta do is mount up the 2 front wheels and we'll be all ready to ride. So I'm just gonna skip this part and the next clip will be me on my board. All right, guys, this first riding clips should be at the end of the Newbee RTKP install video, but if it ends up not being, today we are riding the Newbee RTKP trucks for the first time. I say first time a little bit loosely because I did ride these around my local park for a bit before going on a full speed ride like this. So I kind of have an idea of how they react to things, but definitely not comfortable on them yet. So on here right now we've got the bushings that were installed by default. I'm going to have to double check with Newbee to see which ones they put in my trucks because I can't remember. But I've got them decently loose. I would say that the bushing or the kingpin is snug but not tight. So they're decently loose, and I'm still able to do some pretty tight turns with them. And so I haven't adjusted them yet to be more like high speed stable. Obviously we'll see if we are going to need that as we keep riding, but I've only maxed out at about 25 on these so far. But look at the stance on these things. They're quite wide. I think they look pretty awesome, especially around the back. After I went and adjusted the angle of the drives, everything fits back there really nicely. So pretty happy with how they came together on the board, and they performed pretty good so far, to give you a quick summary. But I'm switching to voiceover on this part of the ride because the audio quality was just not quite good enough. So on this ride I didn't really go much above 30 because it was my first higher speed ride and I just wasn't quite comfortable on them yet. But in any case, I'm just gonna feel them out and see how they go, and as I start to feel more comfortable on them, I'll start to introduce more high speeds. They do feel pretty stable generally. I think the tires and the wheels on here are actually a benefit because the higher amount of gyroscopic force from these huge heavy tires and wheels I think would help the trucks be a little more stable, but they don't really feel too unstable. I think one of the things about the RTKP is that it's kind of trying to bring an RKP or TKP feel to mountain boards that have angled tips, and sort of to that end these base plates are very low angles. You could do this before with adjustable base plates and RKP trucks before, but it's not necessarily as easy as just slapping these on. You kind of have to play an adjustment game and see how it goes. For these RTKPs though, I believe that they're 15 degrees and maybe 0? Can't remember, I'll have to look it up, but for angled tip boards in general, your options are kind of limited for what trucks you can use in the first place, and using regular RKP or TKP without an adjustable base plate is not really a good option. So you're kind of limited to channel trucks or PKP trucks like airs or similar. The experience that I've had so far on them is that they do perform pretty similar to the airs, but not quite as, I don't know how to say it, suspended, I guess. I have not actually spent a ton of time on channel trucks in general. I've heard that the Matrix 3s are pretty good, but my best point of comparison is to the Apex Airs, and those were my favorite truck for a long time. I don't know what the outcome of this test with the RTKP is going to be, but they are a very good option. I don't know if you noticed back there, but I did get a bit of wobble after I hopped over that manhole cover, and that was a little bit sketchy. But the thing that I found so far on these trucks is that it's a little bit hard to control the instantaneous bumps and stuff, and they feel a little bit more twitchy than I did on the Apex Airs. One other thing to mention about these trucks is that they do kind of share a little bit of similarity with the Apex Air. If you look at these trucks up close, they actually do have a second pin in the truck. It's not attached to the hanger, but it does have a bushing on it and gives you a little bit more shock absorption. I think the idea is to reduce the bumps, sort of similar to how it works on the airs. So I'll kind of have to feel it out and see how it feels with a smaller tire, because the 9-inch tires do take up a lot of bumps on their own. The other thing about these huge 9-inch tires is that they're less maneuverable, so I may actually be dampening out some of the twitchiness of these RTKPs by just having the 9s on there. So it'll be interesting to see how the performance changes when I switch to a smaller 8-inch, more nimble tire, which is like my standard that I ride on. My like standard street tire is an 8-inch Kenda for these. But compared to the Apex Airs, these do turn and maneuver a lot easier than the stock setup that I had on the Apex Airs, which was 87A bushings with chubbies on the board side and regular cones on the road side. As you can see, these do have quite a bit of turn tilt, and it does give it an interesting feel, because you really do travel a long distance when you go from full tilt on the right and full tilt on the left. So you could actually end up with wheel blight if you have the wrong deck and tire setup. I don't have that problem here, fortunately, but I guess partially to alleviate that, these trucks are incredibly wide. I believe that there's something like 340 millimeters, and you end up with a stance that is nearly as wide as hyper trucks. I think they're actually wider than the Hypertruck lights. I haven't compared them to the regular Hypertrucks recently, but yeah, overall these are super wide trucks, and I think that may be part of what makes them twitchy, is that the amount of load on the bushings is quite high due to the super long truck hanger. I have actually ridden this route a ton of times, and something that I've noticed with these trucks, I think I mentioned it a couple times, but they're just a lot more twitchy and more unpredictable than the airs. And I know most of the bumps in this entire route, so I can kind of give a really good comparison to the airs. And for me, it feels like when you hit a bump with the airs, they kind of balance out quickly. With these, it feels like it's more of a pivot bounce and less of like a settling bounce. So after I got those speed wobbles on that manhole cover hop earlier, I'm kind of hesitant to go too much faster without either changing the bushings or tightening them down. And when I was actually doing this ride, I had to get somewhere, so I wasn't going to stop and tighten the bushings. But as I'm watching this footage back, I can kind of see the truck wobbling a little bit, which is not something that I noticed too much on the airs. So it's going to be a learning experience with these trucks. I do have a positive outlook on them overall, but going to take a little bit of getting used to, and part of it is just I've been riding my race board a lot on 3 links and some other boards, so maybe I'm just not used to this size of truck, but we'll get there. One of the other points that I've been thinking about while trying to figure out how to describe these trucks is that I think the deck flexibility will affect how well these ride. And for this deck, I would say it's right smack in the middle between flexible and stiff. It definitely has some bounce, but there's not a ton of deck flex side to side. So it makes me wonder if you were to put these on a super flexible truck, super flexible deck, like a Trampa deck, would they have more of an issue with bumps and stuff like that? Even in this clip right now, you can kind of see the rear truck swaying left to right a little bit as I hit bumps, and it's not really the greatest feeling, so I need to figure out how to fix that. I think part of it's going to be just tightening down the truck, because the riptide bushings that are in here do react quite a bit to having higher kingpin nut pressure. So we'll see. I'm gonna have to do at least a couple more rides before I can give a final conclusion, but since I'm doing a full review on these eventually, I'll be able to gather that data over time. And I will be riding these trucks at EastgateCon on this board for the group rides, so I'm gonna get a good amount of time on them pretty quickly. Alright, so I've got some closing thoughts here. This is a slightly different first ride than normal, different route, kind of different speeds. My general takeaway is that I have a positive outlook on these trucks. They are more twitchy than I'm used to, but they're very, very maneuverable, which is definitely a benefit for me. I can pretty easily do single street turns on these, where I usually just resulted to doing a bunny hop on the airs. So I do enjoy having that ability. The bindings do make it easier, of course, but either way it was still difficult on the airs to do single street turns. So I do like that. We'll have to get used to it, and I'll have to sort of tune my feet to being able to take the high speeds, tighten up the bushings, and yeah, I'm kind of just repeating things at this point, but these trucks seem like they're going to be fun. They're well built, and they've got riptide bushings in them right now. So yeah, let me know what you want me to test with these trucks. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like below. Let me know what you want to see and hear about these trucks, and go ahead and get going on that. So thanks for watching, stay safe, keep on riding, and peace out.